This is the tachometer for 1981 BMW R45, which should also be the same for most R65s and R65 LSs of the same era. There may be other models that use this style tachometer. It's one of the few that have all four warning lights in the tachometer instead of somewhere in the middle. This version does not have the flexible ribbon type of PCB. It has a normal PCB enclosed. I personally think it's better, but you'll also notice you can't use cat dash for this kind of upgrade. So there's a trade-off for that as well. But you'll find it's just as simple to either replace the bulbs or put LEDs inside instead. Coming up next. This is the back of the tachometer, and here's the orientation. Don't lose the original orientation that you had. The screw holes need to line up, as also the this little pin hole is how the connector lines up and thus powers and gives signal to all the lights properly. So it has to be put back on the same way, otherwise it won't function properly, and you could probably also cause damage if it's put on wrong. I'm not sure if it can be put on wrong. I've not tried, but just ensure that you do. So just for reference, these are the screws, the threads that engage with the bolts that connect it back onto the front panel holder. Here's the top of the tack. The cutouts here and the BMW logo is there at the top as well. So I just unscrewed the screws that hold this on. There's 3, and I want to make a note that for some reason mine has 2 different sizes. One's larger and 2 are smaller. I didn't really take a record of which one went where when I first took this apart. I just assumed they were all the same. You should never do that. They're just self-tapping for plastic, I guess, screws. So what that means is you have to be very careful when you put them back in, otherwise you might cross thread the old plastic, which is a very bad thing to do. So for what it's worth, I found that this longer one on mine goes on the bottommost. At least I think it does. It works fine, it threads fine. I haven't seemed to cause any damage. So take a look at yours if yours is like that when you do it. Yeah, the 2 smaller ones go up high here, and those seem to work in their respective slots as well. Here's what it looks like when you take off the back cover. Here's my PCB. This outer gasket is a replacement. I had it made, well, I think it came from Czechoslovakia, honestly, but you could have it made. This is silicone. The original was starting to fall apart. I don't know what the original rubber was, but for your reference, it is 3 millimeters thick. The inside diameter is 88 millimeters. The outside diameter is 100 millimeters. You could probably do with a little bit smaller on the outside diameter, but the inside diameter is perfect fit. So you can either find something or try an O-ring, which I don't think will work, but you can try. But I think it should be there because I think it also helps reduce vibration from the engine, and you want these to be sealed from moisture as much as possible. There's also a smaller gasket here. Mine's falling apart. I'm going to try and replace it, but it's going to be a custom cut. I don't think you can find these off the shelf anywhere, or even from BMW. It's the same original rubber. The outside gasket was made. Pretty squishy. It's holding on, but if you can refresh it, I'd go for it. For your reference, the measurements I took, this is 25 millimeters outside diameter, 7.5 millimeters inside diameter. The outside diameter of these pins, if you're going to draw a circle around the pins, is about 16 millimeters, and the pins themselves There's 8 of them. So if you're going to draw this in a design program, just space them evenly around 8. The pins are about, I think they were 3 millimeters diameter each. So if you're going to make those, that's what they are. Anyways, here's your bulbs. This is the tack illumination. This is, so let's take a look. That is the oil pressure. This is your gen light, which you'll notice there's a resistor attached to it. I'll talk about that later. This is neutral, and this is high beam. So these all have colored lenses, but with LEDs it's best to match the color if you can, otherwise the overall brightness of the LED might discolor what you think the lens is supposed to look like. So this is a green LED, this is a blue, these both are red. This is amber. You could do whatever you want for your illumination. I just happen to think amber looks the best with this schema. Too bright of a white, it's harsh on your eyes, especially at night. I don't ride at night, but I'd rather it just look pleasant in all light. Orange looks cool, kind of has the same feel of original BMW. Kind of close to a regular incandescent, so it makes sense. So let's take apart, or let's take out the lights. And these have already been upgraded to LEDs. I just did this because I was struggling to find references for what was even happening in here. So I had to get into it and just see what I had. So this is a mini light, and the size you want for this and the gen light is size 24. And the world of automotive miniature light bulbs is ridiculous, so there's probably other numbers it goes by. I found this on superbrightleds.com. It's red, as you can tell from the overall color scheme. And you'll just need one of each for the oil pressure and the gen light. This is high beams, and it's size 194 from the same website. There's no color to it in this clear encasement, but it is blue, very blue, and looks good when you turn on your high beams. And these just come out straight out like this. It's just a normal insert. So that's what you're looking for. And just for reference, they do have polarity. I've noticed that if you put this in one way and it doesn't work, try the other way. It should work. And there's 2 chances where you can get it wrong. Putting it in here wrong, and you can also twist it 180 and get it wrong. So if you're doing both things at the same time and you're going crazy, try one or the other first before you switch it out the other way. Switch it around. Just in the twist lock thing here, before you think you did something wrong or something's broken, because that happened to me. So same deal with the neutral, except it's green. You can't see it, but same deal. Number 194 size bulb. It's also important to note that you don't get a bulb that's too large. Some of the LEDs, that even though they have the base of a 24/94, the LED itself is huge and tons of lights on it and whatnot. It may or may not fit. So I'd say just go simple. These are bright enough. You don't want crazy bright instruments. I opted for the ones that look like the normal glass encasement already, just to keep it as simple as possible, and I found that they're just bright enough. But I mean, you do you, try what you want, but that's kind of my advice there. Here is the, needs a little bit of help to get the gen light out. So this is a resistor that I've shorted the contacts on, and you do that because if the bulb fails on an incandescent bulb, your battery won't charge right. So this was from a guide from Snowbum. It looks different on other models, but there's two brass contacts here that I soldered onto, which made it very easy. This is a 350 ohm resistor. I think suggested was 330, but the range 330 to 470 works. There may be other ways to do it. I actually haven't turned on the motorcycle and had this work and charged the motorcycle, so I'm pretty sure it's going to work. I followed instructions, but you know, do this at your own risk. You can also melt the plastic if you're not good with soldering iron, so you want a very fine tip if you're going to do it like this on your model. Just use common sense. You can also put the resistor somewhere else in line, but I wanted to just make it very simple and part of the tech. You also need to be careful that this doesn't get too hot because it could melt the plastic, and I think this one's rated to, I think, 0.6 watts. I think it's going to be okay. I'm no electrician or electrical engineer, so there's an asterisk that comes with my claims and suggestions here, so just be careful. Simple quarter turn to get it out. Like I said, size 24 red LED in there now. You could also just leave the incandescent bulb in there. They never fail, or so I'm told, but I just like LEDs and the permanence of them, especially for a motorcycle. It doesn't get ridden a lot, so I couldn't resist. If you have the time, you might refresh this plastic with something like Armor All. These little guys, they get really brittle over time. And I actually had a small crack develop tightening this down. So this is 20-minute epoxy. It's nice and strong, but you know, you don't want this to crack. I don't think you're gonna be able to find another one. It's not an off-the-shelf thing anywhere, and I doubt they're made anymore. So I greased this one up with Armor All after the fact, but just be careful when you're putting it back on. Which is as simple as doing it like this. Gasket goes back on. Line up your screw holes off camera because I can't see it. Short, long. Okay, I'm going to tighten them off camera, but you know how to do it. I'll show you what they look like next. And I'm sorry that I don't have a reference for what they looked like before, but if you have one of these motorcycles, you know what they look like before. They're pretty dim. All back together. Make sure you don't over torque these, just tighten them down. I'm just trying to get a seal on the gasket. Shouldn't wobble or wiggle or anything, but you could really easily strip the plastic inside, or like in my case, crack the back cover housing, and then you have to repair it, or if you're really unlucky, you damage it worse than repair can do. So just keep that in mind. But here we are again. Here's how the LEDs look in the instrument cluster. here's when it's dark. It's actually not so bright in person, and most of these shouldn't be on when you're riding anyways, but definitely more even, and I think it looks a lot better, especially with instrument lighting. Also, a side note that if for some reason your indicator lights in your tack don't work, even though they should be, like you haven't done anything else to the electrical system to ruin it, one of these connectors might have gotten loose. I already forgotten which one it was, but just make sure they're fully seated, because I was almost ready to tear this thing apart and figure out what was wrong with my wiring. But it was just one of them that had popped loose, and as soon as I popped it back in, everything was fine, and these lights would light up again. So don't despair if you find something like that happening.